Hi, it's Gina DePrima, and you're listening to Divorce with Heart. We merge heart wisdom and legal expertise to guide you along your divorce and co-parenting journey. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me. It's Monday. Happy Monday. Yay. It's episode 7 here on Inflow Radio. And today we are going to be talking about all the different paths to a divorce. Well, the most popular paths anyways. And we're going to do that first. Later in the hour, I'm hoping to take your calls. So please give me a call with any questions you have at all, or even just a call and say hi if you want. The number is 1-760-456-7277. I would just love to hear from you. And today is a very, very, very special episode because we have our first guest. Miss Jennifer Woods is going to be joining us today as our first guest in our Spotlight series. I am so excited to have her, so you're not going to want to miss that. Jennifer has teenage boys. She's been through the co-parenting ringer, I guess, if you will. So you're not going to want to miss it. Plus, she's a social worker and works with the family court system. So she's got a lot of information there, too. Let's see. One other housekeeping matter before I dive into the different way to get a divorce. I just want to say thank you. Thank you so, so much for listening and reaching out to me and joining the Divorce with Heart Facebook group page and all your messages that I've received. It means so much to me to hear your feedback because it really just lets me know that, you're there and you're listening, and it's just like keeps me going, it keeps me energized. So keep it coming. I really appreciate it. If you could take a second to leave a rating or review in iTunes, that would be really awesome too. And just keep it coming. I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and if you have a story you want to share, if you want to be featured as one of our Spotlight guests, please let me know that too. And if not you, but you have somebody that you think you want to recommend, let me know. Or a professional you worked with, maybe a mediator, a lawyer, or a coach, let me know. Again, I want to make this kind of like our program. We're trying to build awareness and help people through this tough time in their lives and to get through it with more grace, ease, positivity, and so that they can really build a better, more harmonious future on the other side. So, okay, let's get started on today's topic, the 3 most popular ways to get a divorce. And, it's not that you can only use these methods for divorce. Really, you can use these methods to resolve any kind of family conflict. So if it's just a custody issue, a parenting issue, probably a child support issue, really any family conflict, you can choose one of these 3 paths. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to just keep it, narrowed to divorce. So the 3 paths are mediation, litigation, and collaborative law. So if you want to think about it kind of on a spectrum or see it visually in your mind, I would put mediation on the one end, litigation on the other. So you got like mediation on the left, litigation on the right, and then collaborative law in the middle. And the reason why I like to think about it like that is because collaborative law is kind of like a hybrid of both the mediation avenue and the litigation avenue. But we'll talk more about that after because I'm going to start with mediation. Okay. So mediation, what does it look like? If you choose to approach your breakup or your divorce with mediation, Your goal through mediation is to negotiate the terms of what will be your separation and property settlement agreement. And oftentimes, at least in my practice, and definitely here in New York, we will mediate all of the issues. So we will mediate custody, legal custody, the parenting access schedule. We will mediate the division of all of the property, all of the marital assets in New York. That is equitable distribution. That's the law that controls. And we will mediate division of marital debt. And at the end of mediation, then what you have is this comprehensive contract, your property settlement and separation agreement, which incorporates your child custody and parenting provisions. Oh, also, I don't think I mentioned it a minute ago, but also it will incorporate any support provisions. So, spousal support, or what we call it here in New York is maintenance, and child support will also be included. So when you mediate, what happens is you and your spouse come together with the help of a mediator. So there's 3 people in the room, unless for some reason you decide that you need to consult with an expert. But generally speaking, what it looks like is sitting together in a conference room, or if you were doing it remotely, you can do that on apps like Zoom and things like that. But the point is there's 3 people there: you, your spouse, and the mediator. Now, the mediator could be a lawyer, or could be somebody else, such as a social worker that has gone to training and maybe received various certifications with mediation skills. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer that is performing your mediation, but I do recommend that you look into the credentials of the person when you are choosing a mediator. A mediator's job is very, very, very different than that of a judge. And that's so important. I really want you to understand that, because a lot of times when people go into mediation, and I see this in my mediations often, I've got a husband and a wife and I'm the mediator. And even though I explain to everybody that my role is not to act as a judge, I still see spouses kind of looking to me or deferring to me to make a decision. So you don't want a mediator doing that, okay? And you don't want to engage in mediation where you're trying to then convince a mediator of something, which is something that does happen, because I think people are just used to that. You get 3 people in a room, you're trying to get the third party out on your side. But that is not the purpose of mediation. The mediator's role, their primary role here, is to facilitate the conversation between spouses. So it's to get you talking in a guided fashion, okay? So the mediator should know where you want to go. They should have a roadmap that they're working on. In other words, basically what I just referenced before. We're going to talk about property, we're going to talk about debt, we're going to talk about kids, and they know where they have to go. So the mediator is facilitating that discussion between the spouses in an effort to get each of you, husband and wife, to reach your own agreement. Okay? So you can see that part of the mediator's role is also to educate, to be an effective mediator. And when you're interviewing different mediators, make sure that they have a very thorough understanding of the law, because that's what you want. You want them to be able to educate you on what the law is, because you need to know what you're negotiating and what you're contracting for, okay? Also, try to get a sense of what their experience is, kind of in the real world or in the world of litigation. And what I mean is if you're choosing a lawyer mediator, I really believe it's best that you choose a lawyer mediator that also practices in the area of divorce and family law. So somebody that does mediation as well as litigation, because then your mediator can also provide you with that kind of education and that kind of guidance, all on what you might be facing if you were in that arena. And that's helpful, right? Because you need to understand sort of, I don't know, what's the right word, like the benchmarks of it. If you're going to agree to something in mediation, you're going to want to know, well, what would the likelihood be that this would happen out in the real world if we were in court, or, how would this be handled? Because that's going to help you to make an informed decision, and it's going to help you to negotiate better. Okay. So, I really favor mediators that are practicing lawyers that practice in this area of law, or social workers that are also practicing, pretty routinely in this area of law, because they're going to know, well, hopefully they should, right? Know what the law is, what the local nuances are, what kind of happens in your jurisdiction, right? And also, they're going to know how to draft the best agreements, because that's what a mediator does. Also, they're facilitating that conversation. They're taking down notes. You and your spouse are reaching various agreements on things. And then the mediator has the responsibility of then putting that into a contract that will eventually then be offered to the court, for your divorce. Okay. So your mediator should be well versed in these things so that the mediator knows what language to put in the agreement. And if they're not, or if they're not going to be drafting the agreement, make sure they've got some kind of system set up with a partnering lawyer that will be drafting the agreement. Okay. That's very, very important. Now, mediation overall is, in my opinion, a more, I don't know what's the right word, dignified. I think it's a more dignified way to go through this transition of a divorce. It can certainly be more amicable. And one of the hallmarks of it is that it should be more transparent, and you as individuals, as husband and wife, as spouses, are directly involved. So you two are the two that are making the decisions that are ultimately going to impact you for the rest of your life. And that is not what happens in litigation. You do not have that direct level of involvement usually. So that is key to mediation, and that is one of the reasons why mediation works. Mediation works because you know your family, and nobody knows your family better than you and your spouse. And when you come together with the purpose and the goal of being that you're going to make an agreement on things, you can be much more creative. You can come up with agreements that really are personalized to you and your family. You can be more flexible. You don't have to necessarily deal with, the court's expectations. Okay. And because of this, there's generally more buy-in. And what I mean is, when people have the responsibility of negotiating the terms of their own agreement, they're more likely to follow it. They're more likely to comply with it. And then they're less likely to feel like something was just kind of shoved down their throat or their arm was twisted and they were forced to agree. And that is very, very important. Super important for your future, right? Because after all, that's what you want. You want an agreement that's going to be followed, that you don't have to always worry about going back to court on violations or, unnecessary modifications, maybe, that kind of a thing. And because the two of you, the husband and wife, are coming together to mediate and set those terms out and discuss those terms, it really paves the way for a better future, okay? Because it opens up the dialogue, it can get the two of you talking, and that's what you need to be successful after the fact, right? Because like I've said before, divorce is dissolving the marriage. It's not dissolving the family. So if you want to have a strong family after divorce, and in some cases, I believe you can have an even stronger family after divorce, a more harmonious family after divorce, then you need to lay the proper foundation. And one of the best ways to do that, in my opinion, is through mediation. Because of the direct involvement, because you can be creative, because you can be more flexible, because you are forced to open up the dialogue, right? All of those reasons, okay? Now, in terms of cost, in theory, mediation should cost you less than litigation. Because you're not both hiring your own lawyer to take you through the entire process. And I say in theory because obviously there's always unknown factors that could come up. But generally you're both just hiring a mediator. You can split that fee, and you may or may not also hire a lawyer to eventually review your mediated agreement. Now, I know that that's my policy. I know that a lot of mediators have that policy, but not every mediator, okay? I believe that it strengthens the agreement, makes it more durable, all right? If you have your own lawyer, each of you goes to your own individual lawyer just to review the agreement, just to make sure that you understand everything you agreed to, just to make sure that you understand everything you gave up, just to make sure. That's all. And even though you have to consult with a lawyer or have a lawyer review the agreement, or at the very least that you should do that, that is not the same in terms of cost as hiring a lawyer to actually proceed with litigation. So it should cost less. It should also take less time, in theory, again, because it depends on your calendars and the mediator's calendar, but it should definitely take less time because you're actively involved, you're individually involved. There's less people that you have to go through, right, to reach agreements. Mediation is not for everyone. Even though I love it, it's not for everyone. If you are a victim of domestic violence or the imbalance of power in the relationship is something of concern and of significant concern. In other words, you don't feel as though maybe you can really advocate for yourself or speak for yourself without feeling somewhat intimidated or scared, then mediation isn't good. Because mediation requires both people to be open, honest, and transparent. And if you have that imbalance of power, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. And, and I've seen that, unfortunately. I've been an attorney reviewing mediated agreements where that's exactly what I see, where one person just really absolutely gave away everything under the sun. There could be no good reason for it, no conscionable reason for it. I mean, almost left themselves like a pauper, right? And in this one particular instance, I'm kind of going back on a few years ago, the person did it because they thought the entire time that the mediation, that the separation was just a sham, that they were going to stay together. Well, that's not what happened. So again, how do you avoid those kinds of pitfalls or those cons to the process? One, make sure you vet your mediator, right? Make sure, like I said, that they're a lawyer practicing in this area, or maybe a social worker that's very experienced in this area who is working with a lawyer. So make sure you vet your mediator. Make sure, again, that you're going to feel comfortable sitting there and advocating for yourself. All right. You don't want that imbalance of power. And last, again, even though your mediator that you pick may or may not require it, I would suggest that you hire a lawyer in the end to review the agreement that you reach. Okay. Now, again, in case it wasn't clear in the beginning, because I get this question a lot, when you go through mediation, you are not divorced. It does not result in a divorce. It results in a contract. It results in a separation agreement, a settlement agreement. It basically is the guts of a divorce. Okay, but you're not divorced. In New York, what you would then have to do is you'd have to file for an uncontested divorce and offer that agreement to the court. Therefore, asking the court to incorporate that terms of the agreement into a judgment of divorce. Only a court of law can divorce you. And I don't, know the policies and procedures in every jurisdiction, of course, but my guess is that it's probably the same or very similar. All right. So the other end of the spectrum, litigation, right? This is the most popular way to divorce. This is the way that people have been doing it, as far back as anyone can remember, right? This is where you start to hear about a lot of the horror stories. This is where each spouse lawyers up, right? Everybody lawyers up. They want the most aggressive lawyer. They want the bulldog. You fill in the blank. And so what it looks like is wife gets a lawyer, husband gets a lawyer, and you've got the court involved. So already I think you can see how this kind of process would move slower than mediation. Just think about it. The sheer number of people involved has multiplied. And because you now both have lawyers, you're likely to be told to not talk to each other directly about any of the issues. So now the negotiation all flows through your lawyers, right? And I'm sure you can remember, that telephone game, right? Where you say something to somebody and you pass it along and then all of a sudden the message is messed up and confused. Well, the same potential lies in this paradigm, right? Because wife hires a lawyer, husband hires a lawyer, wife talks to her lawyer, husband talks to his lawyer. The lawyers are then the ones negotiating each spouse's respective position, right? And they have to do this in a way that fits the court's expectations. And they have to do this in a way that's going to fit the court's agenda and priorities in terms of timing and all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of other pressures and agendas at play in this kind of dynamic than there is at mediation. There's a lot of other interests that have to be satisfied. It's no longer just husband and spouse and get an agreement, okay? Because of, like I said, just the people involved. And sometimes as a result, positions are misunderstood, misstated, misrepresented, sometimes maybe intentionally, other times not intentionally. But again, there's a lot of different people involved and everybody has a somewhat of a different agenda and pressure. Okay. The court's going to want the case to move along at a certain pace. They're going to want to see certain things happening. That's kind of the court's pressure and agenda. Your lawyers are going to have their own pressure and agenda in representing you. And it may or may not be the same as yours. Right. And again, this is one reason why it is just so very important that you vet your lawyer. that you pick the lawyer that's going to be right for you. And that is a lot more than just considering, cost or years of experience. In fact, I wrote a PDF on this very topic, choosing the right lawyer for you. And I invite you to take a look at that. All you've got to do is go to my page on Inflow Radio. There's a link there for a free gift. You'll sign up with your email address on my newsletter, which, of course, then you can get all sorts of good tips. And then you can get this PDF for free. I highly encourage you to take a look at it. Okay? So, again, litigation, going back to it and looking at the cost, it is more expensive, I would say. Hands down, most cases, 90% of the time, if not more, it's going to be more expensive than mediation. It's going to take longer than mediation because now you've got to really balance everybody's calendar, everybody's competing interests, all the time pressures, right? And most importantly, there's going to be less buy-in at the end. This is where we hear, a good agreement is an agreement where both spouses are equally dissatisfied, right? Or equally angry, right? This is what I mean. This is why there's less buy-in, because oftentimes you're going to have this feeling of being forced maybe to agree to something, or maybe you felt like your arm was being twisted, or maybe you just felt like you had to because you didn't have enough money for a trial. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, but in the end, more often people feel kind of like the agreement was shoved down their throat, whereas if you mediate, then people tend to feel more like they were directly involved with the process, and it's, something that they designed and created and had full participation in. So they're willing to follow it more. Okay. Another thing that's important to know about litigation is that most of the time, all of the negotiation is going to happen outside of your presence. I mean, here in New York, where I am in Erie County, we have an interesting setup where cases first go to a part of the court called expedited matrimonial. There, spouses are sitting in a waiting area watching whatever's on the television. I don't know, CNN, Fox News, something like that, while the lawyers are in a back conference room talking with each other and negotiating the case and talking with the court attorney referees. Now, they'll come back out. A lawyer will go out and consult with the client, or maybe bring the client in for a minute or two and keep them abreast of what's happening. But really, the negotiations do not happen in the presence of clients. It's just the way it is. And again, it's a longer process. You've got to follow the court's demands and their expectations. You're going to have to be inconvenienced by missing work or whatever it is, that you do on a regular basis, and have to go to court. And then oftentimes just, at least the way it is here in Erie County a lot, sit there watching TV while your lawyers are in the back talking about you. So, as you can imagine, it can be an extremely uncomfortable and an extremely slow process. That being said, it is the best way to proceed if you're dealing with a relationship where there was an extreme or even moderate, just an imbalance of power. It's the best way to proceed, because then you really do need somebody on your side, standing for you and advocating for you under circumstances that you may not be able to do, right? It's also the best way to go if one spouse is dragging their feet, not really into participating, not doing anything they're supposed to do, not wanting to negotiate, not exchanging documents. Then it's the way to go, because once the court's involved, deadlines can be set and things start to move a little faster, wheels get greased, I guess. Also, if you were in a relationship with somebody with more of a narcissistic personality, then yes, I would say that litigation, again, is a better way to proceed, because somebody like that, when you're negotiating with somebody like that, you need the checks and balances of the court. You need the arm or the hammer of the court. So litigation is going to be the right way for you. And of course, at the end, you're going to be divorced because you've already got the court involved, right? Now, 9 out of 10 times, at least in my experience here, even though you're divorced in the end and even though you're litigating, people do not necessarily have a trial. So still, it's not that you're necessarily giving up all of your power to the man or woman in the black robe and rolling the dice and saying, okay, tell me how I'm going to live the rest of my life and how we're going to be a family. Most of the time, that's not what happens. Rarely does that happen in my experience. And really, the one major reason is because of just that. When you go to a trial, you lose all control, and you have no idea what's going to happen, and you've just given the authority to a stranger, right? So that being said, when you go through litigation, most cases, in my experience anyways, do settle. And that is what you want. You want a settlement because you still, you don't want it to just give it all up to a stranger in a black robe, right? It's just that you reach that settlement, that same agreement I referenced when I was talking about mediation. In this case, you reach that settlement through your lawyers. All right, so you're not direct. Your lawyers are negotiating it and giving it to you. All right, last, collaborative law. Collaborative law is also one of my absolute favorites because it combines the best of both worlds, right? When you choose collaborative law, you've got 4 people in the room. You've got wife and her lawyer, husband and his lawyer, and that's it, unless you want to call in an expert. 4 people in the room. But you're in a room. You're in a conference room, just like mediation. You're not in court. And your lawyers that you're choosing, if this is your method, are specially trained in the method of collaborative law. They have to be, and that is key. So again, make sure you know your lawyer because it is very, very different. Collaborative law is different. The entire purpose here is more of a team approach. Okay, so you don't have husband and his lawyer and wife and her lawyer sitting together and just arguing about their adverse positions and trying to force an agreement. That's not what collaborative law is, at least not when it's done right. When you have specially trained collaborative attorneys, what happens is the 4 of you come together and you're trying to reach the terms of an agreement that are going to be, as fair and as equitable to all parties involved. So it's a mutual goal, right? Both sides are working together, understanding and recognizing that, we're laying a foundation here and that family will continue after. So how do we get to where we want to go in the best way possible? And so what that means is, again, like mediation, it's very open. It's very transparent. If there is, if there's maybe an error on one attorney's part or a misunderstanding of the numbers or something like that, in this concept, the other attorney in the other side is not going to take advantage of that mistake or error because it's not adversarial. They're going to address that mistake or error. They're going to bring it to light because, again, it's a team approach. We want to do what's best for the family in collaborative law, okay? What's great about it, though, is that unlike mediation, you do have the benefit of your lawyer that can give you advice and tell you what's best, what's not best. Again, what would happen if you were in the litigation arena, that kind of thing. And remember, if you're just mediating, you don't necessarily have that because the mediator can't give you advice. They can educate you, but they can't give you advice on what you should or shouldn't do. At least they shouldn't be doing that, okay? So when you choose collaborative law, at least you can still get some advice from somebody who can help you look at it from all different angles, okay? And that's nice. That's really nice to have. And it's everybody working toward the common goal. Now, cost-wise, it's more expensive than mediation generally because you're both hiring a lawyer. But still, most of the time, it's less costly than litigation. And from a perspective of just stress, it's definitely less costly, okay? And your future happiness and the degree to which the agreement will be followed, again, there's more of a buy-in. There's more of a buy-in because there's direct participation. So totally worth it, in my opinion. Completely worth it. The only thing is, like I said, you've got to really make sure that you're working with an attorney that is specially trained in the collaborative law method and not just has the training, but like they really get it. Sometimes there are attorneys that are trained in this method, but this has happened to me before. I go there into a collaborative meeting and there seems to be some kind of a misunderstanding where the other side is approaching it more like a four-way settlement conference. And what I mean is then it becomes basically husband and lawyer against wife and lawyer and both just kind of arguing their respective positions. That's not the point of collaborative law. And if that's what's going on, you need to put a stop to it and find a different lawyer. Okay? Because again, there needs to be a team approach. That's what makes it collaborative. It's not just a four-way settlement conference. It's very, very different than that. Okay? The result when you go through the collaborative law, again, is you have an agreement. You have an agreement. It's a contract. You do not have a judgment of divorce. You still have to take another step forward to get that judgment of divorce. But since you both have an attorney involved, what usually happens is you decide through the process who's going to be the plaintiff, who's going to be the defendant, and you go forward from there and you file the paperwork, basically. So I think you can tell that, I'm a little biased. I'm a little biased to collaborative law and I'm a little biased to mediation. Collaborative law is really an awesome process. It's underutilized where I am in this part of the country. I hope it's utilized a little more wherever you are. Yes, going to be going to break. And just to wrap it up, that's just the best way to lay the strongest foundation for your future, minimizing your emotional baggage and protecting your children. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break because that was our producer reminding me of the time. And we have Jennifer. Jennifer's going to join us when we come back. So sit tight. Thanks. Hey there, it's Gina. If you like what you hear, did you know that you can get even deeper and closer to your heart's wisdom and receive personal one-on-one guidance by working with me virtually? If you're sick of drowning in frustration and overwhelm and ready to flow through your divorce and co-parenting challenges, then go to my website and book a call with me. That's deprima.com. DEPRIMA law.com. Or you can find me on Facebook at Deprima Law. Talk to you soon. Some of you have questions about your partnership, marriage, or co-parenting situation. I'm here for you. Give me a call in today's live episode by dialing the U.S. number 1-760-456-7277. That's 1-760-456-7277. Talk to you soon. All right. Okay. Thank you for coming back. And I want to bring Jennifer on. My talk there went a little longer than I anticipated. So let's go. Jennifer, are you with us?
I am, yes.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Awesome.
You are our first guest in our Spotlight series. I'm so
Thank you.
excited
I'm
to
so
have
excited.
you.
Thank you for having me.
So I did post a little bit on Facebook and in the group that, you had two teenage boys and their fathers weren't really involved. So why don't you start there? Give us the background of your situation. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. I had my first son when I was 15, and then my second when I was 19. They both have two different dads. But my 15-year-old, well, he's 16 now. So my first son's dad was never really around. He was kind of in and out. He would come around when it suited him. And then he wouldn't come around at all. So there were times that he'd be around consistently for a couple of months, and then we wouldn't see him for like a year. He's never been a really good provider for Joseph or anything like that. And we were never in a relationship. And my second son's father, we weren't actually in a relationship. It did turn out to be a bad relationship with lots of domestic violence. But my second son came from that, and we broke up when he was 2 years old.
And how were things then with his father?
He stopped seeing my son probably when my son was maybe 3 or 4. So my son hasn't seen him in a very long time. I think he came around maybe 6 years ago, and my son saw him once, and then he hasn't seen him at all since. He couldn't tell you what he looked like at all.
Oh, boy. So you've got two teenage boys, and their dads were dads when they wanted to be.
Right, absolutely.
Right. Oh, so tell us, how did you handle that? What did you do? Because I know you're in a much better place now and your kids are. So walk us through that. What did you do?
So I met my husband when my middle son turned 2. And he's really been a godsend. He's been really supportive of the boys. So I think that's being in a new relationship with my husband. He didn't have any of his own kids. And so I think that really helped to turn things around for me, because I wasn't in a situation where I was relying on them for like child support or to like come and get the kids for work, like to babysit or anything like that. My husband immediately stepped in and did all of that for me. So I'm really grateful to have that. But that helped a lot. And he's been like, for my middle son, he's the only dad that my middle son knows. So, I mean, it's been great. We have one son now together. He's 9. So it's been really great. And to watch him build the relationship with my oldest son, who does know his dad, has been really good too. My husband's always tried to kind of respect his dad's position as you're the dad. And it's very interesting to see the transition. For a very long time, my oldest son called my husband by his name because he had a dad. And my husband was okay with that. And then it was really funny because, of course, my husband cried. But like one day we were like out and my son referred to him as his dad. He's like, I have to ask my dad if I can hang out with his friends. And then my husband was like, oh my God, you call me dad now. So it was a growth in the relationship for sure. But it wasn't.
So even though, let me get this straight, even though dad really wasn't around and there consistently for Joseph, it seems like you still kind of had this atmosphere in your house of some deference, I guess, if you will, or some respect for his role, right?
Absolutely. I think as a parent, my one concern always, like I was really worried about Joseph being mad at me when he got older. So I never wanted to be in a situation where his dad could say, your mom kept me away, or your mom made you call her husband dad, or forced him to do anything in any way. I always wanted to leave those decisions open to Joseph because like it's okay to have two dads. And I respected his father's girlfriend as like his stepmom. But even though they're not married, when you go there, you respect her. the same as you would me. So I tried to build a collaborative relationship. Like that's still your dad. So you have to I didn't want to take that away from him. And I didn't want Joseph to feel like I forced him to do anything either.
Oh, that's really beautiful. I'm sure that was difficult though, right? I'm sure that there were times that it wasn't an easy thing.
It really was, because it seems like I can tell Joseph everything right to do. And then if his dad would tell him something, like that was what was golden. And I'm like, so like they kind of, I think, fantasize like what the other dad is like and build this relationship about how they want it to be. So like he becomes like the perfect parent and I'm the bad guy because I'm with you every day and giving you chores and rules and standards. So it was definitely hard.
Oh, that is such a perfect way of describing it. Like they fantasize. Yes.
Right.
So how did you deal with that? And let me ask you this too. Along those lines, were there times when Joseph would come home and, maybe his attitude toward you would be different, or he'd be bad-mouthing you and things like that? Because after all, his father wasn't really around consistently, right?
Right. Right.
So did you have that experience?
I did, because his dad would tell him, well, I haven't been around because your mom kept me away. And so Joseph would come home and he doesn't have to listen. And my dad said this, and my dad said that you haven't been answering his phone calls or anything like that. So I did get a lot of questioning from him, and there would be some defiance too. And that was hard because when I would call his dad back, like, let's be on the same page with discipline. His dad was like, no, that's your house. You handle it. So he would kind of like plant these seeds for Joseph or tell him like, you don't have to listen to Dennis. Like Dennis isn't your dad. Like you don't have to listen to him. So then now there's this pushback in the house between Joseph and my husband that his dad kind of planted those seeds for. So it was rough. Like we would have to give him maybe a day or two to adjust, honestly.
That's what I'm wondering is how did you handle that with Joseph? Like how did you respond to him? What would your advice be?
I know. I try to keep a policy of honesty with them. So I'm very open and honest. And I don't do like I talk to my kids. Like I am the lecturing mom. So I will lecture you until they pass out. But I talk to them and I'm like, you still, like, no matter where you go, if you went to your friend's house and come back, you can't bring that behavior home because that's not your everyday life. Like you went there and you had fun. I told them to honestly consider it like a mini vacation. But then when you come back home, it's back to the real world and back to your everyday life. And I told them that, and not to that, like, I didn't want to like disrespect their household. So I did a lot of explaining about how everybody runs their household differently. So things that you can do there, you can't do here. And like the way they talk to their parents there, we don't do that here. So if he wanted to go to both places, he's going to have to stick to both sets of rules. And that worked really well with him. It's like, when you're at his house, you do whatever y'all do there. But when you're home, like it's time to do what we expect of you. So.
And that worked for you.
It did. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. How old is he now?
He is 16.
He's 16. Okay.
Yes.
Great. And your younger child, how old is he?
He's 9. 13? I have a 16-year-old, 13, and 9-year-old.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. And so where are you at today? What's the relationship today for Joseph and your husband and your middle child?
We're all pretty good. My husband adopted both boys. So my middle son's been adopted for 2 years and Joseph's been adopted since December. Joseph's adoption was just finalized. So it's been going really well. I think that Joseph is still trying to figure out, because he has other siblings. So he's still trying to figure out his role. It was really important for him to still be able to stay connected with those siblings.
Do you mean siblings on his father's side?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean. and it was important for him to maintain that relationship. So he's trying to figure out hanging out with them, but then not wanting to speak to, we call him his old dad. So not wanting to speak to his old dad, but still wanting to be able to interact with those little brothers there. So, but everything is going really well. I can say, since the adoptions, it's made things, especially for my middle son, much more permanent. Like my husband's always been his dad, but now he has the last name. And he knows like nobody else is going to come in and you're not going to leave and go anywhere. And there's no more. It took away those questions. He did have a lot of questions about, well, why doesn't he want me? And things like that. So it did bring a lot of permanency, I think, for my middle son, the adoption.
Oh, that's so good. And your sons, are they at the age then where I think your oldest is for sure, right? He had to consent to the adoption, right?
Yes, he did. He had to consent.
Uh-huh. Wow. And that's Joseph. Scary. So he did that, and he knows who his father is, his biological father, right?
We never, my husband and I made the decision for my middle son. Even though my husband's the only dad that he knows, we made that decision for him. We did talk to him. This is what we're going to do. But for Joseph, we gave him the option when we adopted my middle son, so we could do it all at once because that would be easier for me. And Joseph said he did not want to be adopted at that time. And it was about this time last year, Joseph kind of sat down with me and my husband and said that he did want my husband to adopt him. And so then we moved forward with the decision then. So we waited until he said he wanted to.
So he asked for it. He asked for it. Wow. Okay.
Yes, he did. Wow. So it was awesome.
Looking back, I guess, what was your biggest takeaway, or what can you suggest to our listeners here to help them if they're dealing with this kind of a situation?
I think that maybe as women, maybe we put up with more than we need to. Maybe like for the sake of the kids. My middle son's father was physically abusive, and Joseph's father is still verbally abusive towards me to this day. And for years, like I just would say, it's okay. And try not to engage with it, thinking that, if I behave a certain way, they will too. But in my mind, it was all for the sake of Joseph, so that Joseph can have a dad in his life. But I think that my biggest takeaway is Joseph didn't need that negative influence. I didn't need that negative influence. And I think I was talking to one of my relatives, and she said, well, some dad is better than no dad. But that's not necessarily the case. I think some really bad dad is not better than having no dad at all. I think there can be a lot of fear associated with being alone and raising kids alone, because you shouldn't have to do it, but sometimes, unfortunately, we do. And I think maybe that kind of keeps people in situations where they know that they should kind of set firmer boundaries or kind of back off some. So I think probably like my biggest takeaway or advice would be just to kind of analyze, like, if it's not a healthy situation for you, it's not going to be a healthy situation for your kid either. So yeah, I think that's
right.
Really
boundaries, right? Boundaries are very important. That being said, though, sometimes that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. So I know we're almost done, but do you see maybe how Joseph's relationship and what he's gone through with his biological dad has impacted his character today in a positive way?
Absolutely. For a very long time, he's such an easygoing kid. He's just like, whatever. He just goes with the flow. But I think he really learned with his dad to set those boundaries too. And I let him learn those things for himself. So he would invite his dad to his track meets, and he wouldn't show up. And eventually Joseph had to kind of mature and learn that, you can invite my husband to come, or my husband's dad, or another relative to come to get that support. So he kind of learned to build relationships in other ways instead of like waiting and wanting one person to do it so badly. Because for a very long time, he wanted his dad to be everything for him. And then he kind of transitioned into opening up to other people instead of just quietly waiting for his dad to show up and being disappointed. So it did. I feel like it empowered him really to reach out and build other relationships.
Oh, good. Yeah, it sounds like it. you became more resourceful and opened up. And yeah, that's
Absolutely.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with us. I really, really appreciate it. And you're part of the group, right? Divorce with Heart. So people can reach you there if they want, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Come back next week and be sure to visit my website at dpremalaw.com to book a call, or let's connect on Facebook at dpremalaw, where you can join my group for more support. Please remember that the information shared is for general and entertainment purposes only, and that by calling in or messaging me, we are not creating an attorney-client relationship, and my advice is not intended to be legal advice. For specific legal advice, please contact a lawyer in your jurisdiction.
This show is brought to you by InflowRadio.com, the best curated talk radio network for personal development, wellness, spirituality, and conscious business.